For the next part of this afternoon, we're going to have a conversation, not you lot, because you've just been doing that. We're going to invite two people onto the stage, and they're going to have a conversation, and we're going to eavesdrop. And then, but there will be an opportunity to ask some questions towards the end of it. So Jackee Holder is one of the people that is coming up, and what I like about Jackee is she's written how many books now? 4 books. I've still got that book inside of me, you know what I mean? Yeah, but I've got about half a page done, and Jackee's knocked out 4. But what I like about Jackee, she's got a great energy about her. She's always colourful, always happy. And if ever you get a chance, have a look at her website. She's got this alternative CV, and it's really quite different. I'll just leave you to have a look at that. So those that don't, you won't know what I'm talking about. But have a look, it's nice. So Jackee, would you like to come up, please? And the next guest that we have this afternoon, we did have actually on your leaflet, just so you don't go trading standards or anything. Gopi Patel unfortunately couldn't make it. There was some problem with her flights, and it cost far too much money to have got here on time. So we've got, it's not a substitute because we've gone up a gear. It's a promotion, right? Because we've got Manda Patel, who runs, who's been to the Global Retreat Centre in Oxford. Ah, very good. Did you have a nice time there? And what are the biscuits like there? And here, you only get one, don't you? There, you're like, there's a great big bowl of them.
Neil, you should kill that so often.
Yeah, I know. I've got to be careful, I end up with a reputation. But Manda, I've actually experienced leadership from Manda, because sometimes I go to GRC just to help out. And what I like about Manda Patel is Manda has got a serious position, not serious, but an elevated position within the Brahma Kumaris. She has to look after, a lot goes on there. You can see how big the place is and how busy it gets. But what I like about Manda is she's so approachable. You know, sometimes you find people in a position of authority and they're unapproachable. And I've really taken a lot from Manda's management style into my own company. Because I feel you don't mess with her, but there's always a smile when you see her, and it's a nice balance. So I'd like you to come up now. And enjoy the conversation. Thank you.
We'll get you later.
So I'd like to welcome everyone and say good afternoon, and I'm absolutely looking forward to having my conversation with you, especially now that I know that you can't be messed around with. I better just go careful, but yes.
I think you have the same streak.
I So you've heard these little rumours.
I don't like the cast life.
In actual fact, we've been finding out that we actually have a lot in common, don't we?
Yes,
it's really interesting. I've seen you, Manda, obviously at Oxford. I've seen you in the background, and I kind of got a sense of your spirit. And when I saw you today, I thought, oh, I'm really up close with you now, because I've never been this close, like in a room and certainly sitting on the stage with you. And I think a good place for us to start, maybe, is I'd love to know more about your personal journey. Where have you come from, and what's got you to where you are right now, particularly in this role that Neil has described that you have at the Brahma Kumaris?
Right. Well, you know, since the subject of conversation is leadership, I have to say I never really started off from that at all. I started my own spiritual journey when I was 19, actually, and my mother had started meditating, and I learned about the Brahma Kumaris at that time. And then I remember going through this process in my mind consciously. This is not what I want. I have a life ahead of me. I don't intend to get into a white sari, and I don't intend to sit and meditate for however long it is that they meditate. And so I really chose actually not to go there consciously. By the time I was 21, I really began to think about life seriously. I don't know what that means, but I just began to think that there's got to be more to life than how it's expected these days. But also, actually, when I learned about Brahma Kumaris when I was 19, one thing had struck me, and that was that our world is really heading for big trouble, and that our world is in need of help. And that stayed with me. So when I was at 21 and processing what I wanted to do, that's something that kept coming back to me. And I remember that even at that time, before I actually started my journey with the Brahma Kumaris directly, with personal involvement, I remember writing off to different charities and saying to them, look, I'd like to help, I'd like to go to third world countries maybe and do something. But funnily enough, they all wrote back saying, okay, we'll get back to you, but here's a donation form in the meantime, can you fill that in? And so I had done that. So really my calling had been to serve, to help people. And initially, before my spiritual awakening, I suppose, before it seemed more physical to go and help people in need. But I had this amazing spiritual experience when I went out of my own choice to the Brahma Kumaris Center. I say out of my own choice because prior to that it was my mom's pushing that got me there. So when I went out of my own choice, I had this incredible experience of joy and happiness, and until that point I thought my life was fine, I was young and I had a life ahead of me, I could do whatever I wanted. But that experience made me actually realize there's more to life than what I had perceived up until that point. And I realized that that's what I wanted more of, and that's what the world needs now. So really, in a sense, that's where my journey started. And I never started off thinking, well, I'm going to run this, and I'm going to run that, and I want to lead this, and I want to lead that. It was never that. Really, actually, if there was anything, it was just that, well, I want to be of use. And I want to be able to do what's needed in the time that is needed and the way that it's needed. And that's, in a sense, got me where I am today. And I don't like that expression, got me where I am. Well, where am I anyway? It's not about status and position and anything like that. But anyway, many of the things that Neil was talking about really resonated. And I felt that he was really talking more about his own spiritual journey as well as he was talking. And I really feel that it's more about that. And when you can be authentic in your own exploration and your journey of life, then you find yourself, helping people. And just that really.
So I'm fascinated by the fact that so many of us find it hard to not follow a path that is dictated or encouraged by other people's conditions or expectations of us. But here you were at the age of 21, you followed your own calling, you listened to your own inner voice. So much of the work that I find myself involved in is really about helping people kind of get rid of the stuff that is in the way of them listening to that inner voice. And I was also struck by the fact that it's, in a way, the universe always gives us a better outcome than the one we would have intended for ourselves. So by you trusting that your plan was not the only plan or the way to do it, the universe opened the way for you and showed you where...
I suppose the key thing, again, I identified with what Neil was saying when he was talking about being authentic, and this thing that how we always feel that we have to comply with the norm and what's expected of me. And this is the big thing, especially coming from Indian culture, actually. And yet I was prepared to say, no, I can't worry about what people think and do. But I suppose you also must have had a similar kind of a thing, as we were saying earlier on. So maybe you can share a little bit about your own journey.
I'm particularly struck by when you said, like, you know, coming from the Indian culture. My parents came to the UK. My dad came in 1959. My mum came in 1961, and she had me in 1962. So there was quite a lot. They left Barbados in the Caribbean. They'd come over here as immigrants to the UK. It was in search of for them, it was a vision of a better life. Mm-hmm. How could they create a better life for their children and their families? Mm-hmm. They left I had two older brothers left in Barbados, one who was under a year, who was then brought up by my grandmother. So I started life out in South London, in Clapham, and I suppose for me, just listening to your story about your spiritual awakening, mine sort of happened in a different kind of way. Up until the age of 7, I remember being very, very happy. I have a very strong memory of my life. I was very close to my dad. My mum was more in the background, mainly because she was raising my younger brother, who was also born here in the UK. He's about 3 years younger than myself. And I had this very strong, loving, vibrant relationship with my dad. I would go to places with my dad. And then our lives changed. We bought a home in West Norwood in South London, and my 2 older brothers and my grandmother came to live. And that whole sense of my life changing, a number of different experiences, I described it in a piece of writing recently as it punctured my life. It was almost as if I was living in this fantastic balloon of joy, happiness, and then it got punctured.
So how come, in a sense?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think for me, where it really begins, where that story changes course, or changes direction, was that I see myself as a thriver, but for some people they will know it in terms of, I'm a survivor of child sexual abuse when I was 7 years of age. So what it did for me is in a way, I went into a dark, deep depression about myself as a child. So there I was, I had this really strong, vibrant sense of myself. And if you can imagine, it's almost like my shadow came and it just smacked me right in the face. I had no one to talk to. I had nowhere to take it. I had no one to witness my story. Because I'm a real believer. My journey has shown me that actually what most of us want is a witness to our stories. So there I was at 7 years of age, and actually for my healing journey, what I needed was someone to tell me that actually I mattered, what happened to me wasn't my fault, and that I could have somewhere where I could let that pain come out of me so it could be transformed. I had a situation recently where I was being coached by someone in America, and she was coaching me around a particular aspect of my business. I wanted to put some more products out that would not just print books. So I'm creating all these online courses. And I'd had a particularly bad day. Her call was at 4 o'clock.
In the morning?
No, in the afternoon. And I thought, oh dear, I'm not feeling great. I noticed that my emotions were I was very present with my emotions. And I thought, it was going to be morning time where she was. So I couldn't, if I emailed her, it was going to be like 5 o'clock in the morning. So I thought, actually, I'm going to need to go ahead with it. Came onto the phone. The first thing she said to me was, how are you? And I just burst. It was just like a dam, you know, it's floods of tears, feeling really heavy with what was on my mind, what I was going through. And she let me just say what it was for about no more than 2-3 minutes, and immediately I felt better. And she said something that really resonated with me, which is what I think that young Jackee was really in need of. She said, allow your pain to help you write what you are working on. So it was almost as if she was saying to me, that energy that you have just released is not all bad. There's some goodness there, there's some aliveness there, there's some energy there. And that's what I noticed about myself as a child. I really had, even though I had this very traumatic thing happen to me, I had a lot of energy. I had a lot of life. And it was almost as if certain people stepped into my life to be my guides. I had a teacher at primary school, her name was Mrs. Hines. She was my primary school teacher for about 3 years, but she was also the art teacher. She gave me a deep love of writing. She gave me a deep love of creativity and art. And she really helped me hold on to myself. I turned 50 2 years ago, and a friend said to me, we're having a conversation, my oldest friend, her name's Pauline, we met when I was 5 years old, we went through the whole of primary school together, and we were talking about me and writing, and she said, do you know you used to write really deep poems at school? And I said, are you serious? She said, whenever we had a English class, you would write, where everyone would write one poem, you'd write 3 or 4. And Mrs. Hyde would always read out bits of your poetry, and she said to me they were always deep. And I think that part of, for me, the journey of being a coach is that we invite people to show up and show their real selves. When I say that, I'm talking about the shadow side, which I think so many of us in terms of leadership push aside as if that part of us is not okay. Like, we shouldn't allow that part of us to be revealed, because I noticed that I allowed those parts of myself to sit together, to walk with me, and I think that's what's helped me in my journey.
It's so true, isn't it? Then the quality actually that's needed in what you're describing is this quality of honesty, to really be honest with yourself, and the desire for transformation too. And when we want to change, it's not that it's all going to happen nice and smooth, and this dark side that comes up, but it's okay, it's okay. But you know, I was curious about, because you do coaching, you coach leadership, or people in leadership, or people who want to be leaders, I don't know how. Both. And as I was listening to Neil again, I was realizing that in my situation, it's not that I coach people overtly, in a sense that you sit with them and chat with them and process things with them and be with them when they are exposing themselves. But because I'm in a situation where I am, for instance, I generally work, not generally, completely work with people who are on a spiritual journey themselves. And so we don't have this culture, if you like, within the Brahma Kumaris, whereby you would coach people in that way. Or somebody comes to you and chats with you. You might get, from time to time, some people, but people who are, in a sense, living and working in the Brahma Kumari situation, we're very much equals. And that's the way I like it. Of course, there are those who are spiritually advanced and experienced, and we see them as senior teachers and yogis. But generally, within where I am, in my situation, it's more not sit-down coaching, but you actually can only coach by being yourself, and sometimes holding a thought or an idea in your own mind, and kind of bringing that moment, as you say, that the things that you need come to you, bringing that moment close to you so that you can explore it with them voluntarily, there being voluntarily present and open, or just be it. You just cannot talk to people about it, because people don't want anybody, in a sense, feeling that they're in a position they know more and they can do something for you, which I also think is interesting, in the sense that it takes greater power, perhaps for me sometimes, I can it's much easier to go up to someone and say, but you know what, it would be really better like that. And sometimes it's possible. It's not always possible. Sometimes it's possible, but often it's more, you just have to say, okay, I hold this, and I know it, and I know this is going to be good for you, and it's going to be good for all of us. Just hold it, and wait for them to catch it.
I really love this, because It's interesting because over the years, I have been becoming much more uncomfortable describing myself as a coach.
Yeah.
I notice people's body language. I notice people's responses. And I think I train a lot of coaches. So one of the things that we often talk about is the power dynamic around coaching. So you and I are sitting here, and Neil talked earlier and mentioned quite a few times how much wisdom is here in the group. So I know that I have wisdom, and so do you. So the idea of a coach coming almost as the expert or somehow having something more than you would have, for me is increasingly uncomfortable. And the vision that's kind of been coming to me is one of a world in which all of us will be having conversations that is what I think is the essence of what coaching is trying to share with the rest of the world, is about different kinds of conversations that have different qualities of communication that can happen in a minute, can happen in 5 minutes, can happen in 15 minutes, can happen in an hour long if we have that amount of time to have that kind of conversation. But also in support of the kind of coaching that's happening in businesses and organisations, because I go into a lot of those organisations and I can see that a lot of organisations need help. So they may not have you, Manda, there to have that conversation with them at the photocopier. So there is a need for us sometimes to formalise some of those conversations. For example, I might go into an organisation, I work in the NHS, for example. So we are working with senior leaders in the NHS around offering them 6 1.5 or 2 hour coaching sessions. The NHS is under attack. It's in an enormous stressful environment to work in. So we know that many of the leaders that are working in there, they're often working to a point of burnout, they're often working under enormous government pressure, patient pressure, and all-round stress in relation to their lives. And most of those people aren't stopping. They are not listening to the bell every hour and thinking, let me take a 5-minute meditation, let me think about taking a deep breath. So sometimes our interventions need to be structured and more formalised. Yes. There's different ways that we have to get to the essence of the work that the Brahma Kumaris is here talking about, which is we know that when people come back to their essence, we know that that is the highest place to be working from and with other people. So I think there has to be a room for both.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And actually, as you say, I'm thinking for my own self that I could do with some training in perhaps the way I might articulate myself. As we are saying, I'm energetic and I see something and I'm in there. But sometimes I have to say, okay, don't go in there in the sense that I'm there saying something, and perhaps saying it in a way that's quite confrontational for someone, or it's perhaps insensitive to where they might be. So I'm very aware of that, and so I can see that kind of training as to phrasing. I was reading something that someone showed me that they prepared the other day. That's right. I was in Italy and we have a retreat centre there, a small one. So I was there for a few days, chatting with the people that live there, and they had someone there who's kind of experienced in this kind of thing. And she was showing them how, instead of always going in there with an answer yourself, or making an assumption, or going in with an answer, can you ask the question and let them come up with the answer? And I'm very aware that that's the kind of training I could do with, because it's very helpful to just, and in trying to get the best out of people in that way too.
So it's interesting because I think earlier Neil said, let silence do the heaviest lifting. That phrase, I trained with something called a Fierce Conversations trainer with a woman, an American woman named Susan Scott. She wrote a book called Fierce Conversations, and then she wrote a book called Fierce Leadership. And it's all about how we communicate, but we communicate from a place of truth and honesty. How we get into the conversations that we need to be having, not the conversations that we avoid having. And that's both with other people and with ourselves. And one of the things that I've noticed about coaching, and these are qualities that for me, if I think about not using techniques, so I train coaches, I've done lots of coach training myself, and it's very easy to learn all these very juicy, seductive tools that you think, oh, I could use this on someone, I can help them get, be a better presenter, deal with conflict, because I've got this model, I've got this framework. There's a therapist, his name is Irvin Yalom. He said, he obviously trains therapists and counsellors. He said, technique is what you use before the therapist arrives. So this idea of, once you get past holding on to the techniques, you realise that actually there's some very simple tools. So silence, for example, means that people have time to listen to their own inner voice. So if you create that space in your day, whether that's with yourself or with somebody whether that's a formal coach or somebody who is going to do some peer coaching with you, so you and I can meet and do some peer coaching, which means we are both sharing the coaching space. So I would give you time, and then you would give me time, so that way there's quite an equal sharing of coaching. Silence often allows us to listen to ourselves. If you take the word silence and you reassemble the word, you actually get the word listen. So that way you can actually see what is it you need to do differently. How are you, or how have you been showing up in your life? So silence is very key to the space that is created between two people having a conversation, whether that's in a formalised coaching space or not. The second one is what you mentioned about the questions. So often, sometimes we just need to ask one question, and we might ask, sometimes I don't give myself a hard time about this, sometimes I ask really crappy questions until I get to the good question.
I'm not good at asking questions.
Right, but if we've got to be willing to allow ourselves to ask as many questions until we get to the one that really, and I always think about it as, I'm looking for that question that lands with you.
Yes.
How will I know?
Yes.
Unless I'm willing to allow myself to be messy around those edges.
Right.
I don't want to be a polished coach.
Right.
I am not Jackee who turns up in orange tights and a light pink dress. This is just me in my body form. What I'm more interested in is the Jackee who's inside here. Is she willing to allow herself to not always know what to do, know where to go, in service of the other person who is with me, who I am in conversation with? And I think if we're willing to have a lot more of those conversations, all of us are great coaches.
Actually, as you talk about conversations and coaching, I'm remembering two types of people in my own life, in a sense. One is the administrative head of the Brahma Kumaris, and if you've been to Manda, you would have met her, Dali Prakashmani. She passed away a few years ago. And I always remember her, she used to sit in the courtyard of our headquarters. She used to sit in this plastic garden chair, and she'd sit there with her hair open in the sun, drying her hair. And people would come and gather around her. People would come, sit with her and chat with her. She was just so approachable. She was like your mother, your grandmother, your friend, just sitting there. And they would sometimes have questions that were of a spiritual nature, of their own journey. And sometimes there would be things to do with the work that they have to do. And she was just so easy and made people feel that they belonged. She made people feel that they were part of her family. She'd be just seeing somebody walking by and she'd call him by his name and say, come and sit down, come and sit with me for a few minutes. These kinds of things, and you watched her and you think, that's what I like. That's what I like to be, And so that's one type of an example that I'm remembering in my own life. And then currently, in a sense, I have friends. There are a few friends that I can have completely open, deep, meaningful conversations with. And our conversations build. None of us are thinking that we're coaching each other in that sense as such, but we all know that we're taking so much from this conversation. Taking in a sense that we're moving inside our hearts and our minds, our intellects are like, you know, having earth-shattering movements in a sense, and you come out of those conversations different to the way you went in.
I love that. I love the way you describe that, because I think that so many of us are hungry for those kinds of conversations. And what we're talking about is often, I think that if I think about myself and I think about my journey, and I think about the way I've held myself back, I believed my story. I believed my story that I wasn't good enough, that I'm worthless. So there have been parts where I've been able to step outside of that story and really kind of strive to achieve things in life, often based on what I thought would make my parents feel proud of me, might make other people feel proud of me. But eventually I got down to the kind of, started to get to the essence of what I wanted. But the things that allow you to flourish, the things that allow you to fly, the things that allow you to make those mistakes and take those risks are people who love you, people who don't judge you. I think that is what people are looking for when they are in the presence of somebody who holds that space for them. I can remember my very first coaching session. I was, it was 1985, I'd just finished university. I'd got my first job as a youth and community worker over in the London Borough of Hackney. And as part of our professional development, they said to me, you've got somebody who's they're called a non-managerial supervisor, and you're going to meet with them every month, and you've got 2 hours with them. And I was like, okay, so what am I meant to talk to this person about? They said, you can talk about anything to do with your work. They're not connected to the line management here, so that is your space. And her name was Rose. I remember going into that first session with her. We sat in a really big room, and I was very conscious of the space that I was sitting in. And into the conversation, about half an hour in, I began to feel myself inhabit my body. Because for the first half an hour, I wasn't really in my body. I was kind of half out there. All these things were going around in my head. But the more she spoke to me, the more she focused and gave me attention, the more I arrived back into my body. Until I did not feel I was in that room. All of it eventually got to this synergy where it was just me and her, and I could feel myself expanding as a result of her presence, her witnessing. And I don't think she was saying very much. I think she was actually inquiring, and she broke open something in me.
It's very interesting, and I to go back to what you were saying earlier on, a little bit about how we want this kind of conversation, we want this kind of setting whereby we're accepted. But you know what? We are so trapped in trying to be what other people want us to be. It's such a trap. Whoever you are, whatever you are, even us on our spiritual journey, I tell you, so much trapped in trying to be what other people want us to be, trying to conform, trying to be accepted, trying to be that others see us as one of them, and yet, you know, to shed that, well, we mentioned courage earlier on, takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of courage to shed that and say, well, you know what, I am what I am, and it's okay.
I think something comes before the courage. I think vulnerability.
Yes.
I think it's actually when I am willing to allow myself to be vulnerable, that actually the essence. I actually bought this, the Russian doll. It's like, you know, why am I carrying this around? And it's really interesting because I think that the Russian doll really symbolises what we're trying to get to, because we're often taking off all these layers, and when we look inside, it's the opposite of what we think about in terms of little me, because I think that's our essence.
Yes.
And that's the part of ourselves that we're wanting to return home to.
Yes.
And it is that place where I think our greatest work happens.
Yeah.
And I also want to say, in relation to what you said, Manda, was I have even found myself on my spiritual journey thinking that there was a way I needed to be.
Yes.
You know, it's like there is an expectation of what spiritual looks like.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not spiritual if I don't meditate as often. I'm not spiritual if I don't have this sudden spiritual awakening.
Yeah.
I actually found there were 4 years of my life where I was a long distance runner. And for me that was one of the greatest meditations.
Yes.
I would run all over London and find that I really reconnected with myself by running early in the mornings and getting back out into nature. I found it spiritual.
Yeah. I was wanting to describe that little doll that you brought out with the essence.
Yeah.
And this essence is, you know, where I feel so at one with myself, so at peace with myself, like you're describing, that I'm just the pure energy.
Yes.
This absolute pure energy of deep love,
Yes.
of truth and peace. Really that simple.
Yeah.
Because we try to make life very complicated, actually, as it is. And if it's not complicated, it's not worth anything. But yet it's so simple. That little me is really little me, but the little me that expansive, and it expands into this entire universe with its energy, with its vibration, with its peace, and with its love. That's the essence that ultimately I need to return to.
Yeah.
And when you, as you describe, I always say to people, everybody meditates. Anything that gives you the kind of experience that you're talking about, where you really are connected with yourself. We all meditate, actually, but it's just that, in other words, we're giving focused attention to in such a natural way, but we actually don't realize the outcome and the result that's coming from that. We take it so for granted, and so we don't realize that actually this is it.
Yeah.
This is it. But then we formally try to meditate, and I can't do it.
Yeah.
I can't concentrate. I can't do this. I can't do the other. But yet you do it.
Yeah.
You do anything that you give focused attention to is a form.
I'm so glad you said that, because when I go into organisations, we teach things like mindfulness, and we bring that into coaching, because often that's what the coaching does. It gives people permission to slow down. It gives people permission to become mindful. It gives people an opportunity to meditate on their lives, to meditate on themselves. So for me, there are so many different ways, and your way is not going to be my way, but it's celebrating the ways that we find.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's the key for me.
Yeah, sure.
So I'm just
I think we've nearly.
Have we done? Have we gone over time?
Yeah.
You're doing everything right. We're in time, but I'm sure it's been good, isn't it? Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Okay, so now you can get involved. We're not going to have a mass conversation, but any questions? Do you have any questions? Have we got a roving mic?
I'd just like to make a comment.
What?
Just look at these two ladies. White and orange and orange and white. They're so beautiful.
Actually, we didn't realize. Actually, when we were just about to get up here, we realized we planned to sit like this, but we didn't kind of coordinate in this stage deliberately.
That was not deliberate.
No, that's being in tune, you see.
Yeah. Good observation.
Hello ladies, just lovely to hear you both speak. I enjoy every moment of it. I'll just dive into your face as I sit here. The question goes to Jackee. Your story is just very similar to mine, very similar. But you mentioned something about when you talk about being a coach, you get uncomfortable, which is what I'm going to. When people say a coach, I want to tell them that I am a coach, or tell me to become a coach. I feel very uncomfortable inside, but I don't know why, but I do say to them, I am an inspirational speaker. that sounds a bit intimidating as well. So what do? I know I got to work with you from listening to you picking up your spirits. What do I do? How do I feel? Or how should I feel when not being uncomfortable? I know we've got to be honest with ourselves.
Yeah. I think one of the things is really exploring what is it that you are sharing with people. Because sometimes I think that there are certain words or roles that don't describe exactly what we are doing. The reason I started to become uncomfortable because I just started really observing people, just noticing their body language when I say I'm a coach. You know, where did you train? How did you get into it? What is it you do? Which is, for me, is not necessarily about the essence, and probably some of the greatest teaching comes outside of the coaching, which helps what I bring into the coaching. So I'm still on this journey of, I think there's something about sometimes letting go of attachment to form. You know, that I think that sometimes there are people who would not describe themselves as coaches who are actually great coaches. So what does that say about us? And maybe the word is getting a bit worn out, and we need to just think about different ways of describing ourselves, really. And I think that sometimes that's a bit of a journey. So I'm noticing that my work is really synergizing into a lot more of helping people express themselves through the written word. Writing is my preferred medium. For many years, my voice was quite conditioned in terms of I did what I thought was being the good girl. Did really well at school, academically, went to university, did all of those things that I felt were the right things, but my voice was much more authentic on paper than it was verbally. So therefore, it's now just really just finding the route to my journey that feels right. And maybe it's that I've outgrown the role, and something, you know, maybe that's something you can explore, and just thinking about what new form might be emerging.
Okay, you're similar to me as well because I do writing and I do coaching on that as well. So I've been branching on that area to do a lot more writing because, as you said, your voice come out in your writing, which is with me. Because for many years as a child, I never believed in myself. I was useless, I was worthless, all the names, and I believed all those stories until the penny dropped. And I said, no, that's not me, this is me now.
We have to let go of our stories. But Manda, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think what you're saying is very true, and I you know, whereas I'm the other way, I cannot write. Well, I say that, but I have a friend who says to me, no, Manda, you can write.
I'm so glad she said that.
But I still haven't managed to do it. I attempt, I've got these books, so many I've started. So everybody's different, I think. And I process things by speaking about them. I process things when I'm in conversation with friends or when I'm in conversation with people who are willing to go there. And as I speak, things come out of my head and my mind that allow me to articulate myself. Whereas writing, I think maybe my handwriting's not so good or whatever.
So you've already given me lots of information. You've got to come on one of my workshops. You've told me you've started many books, and then you've told me about your handwriting. So there's actually a lot of material there for us to work with.
Okay, I'm coming to your writing workshop.
Any more questions? At the front.
This question is for Sister Manda. You know, when we coach or we lead, there's a formal description of leadership, and very often it's connected to an organization, whether it's in the professional field or in the spiritual field. The question really is, how authentic can we be with the label of a company or an organization? Do we always need the label?
Yes.
We can be and not be part of that label?
That's a very good question. I think that you just have to be yourself. It's nothing to do with being part of an organization or having a position and a status. When we were talking earlier on, I was saying this, that the moment I say, well, I want to be a leader or I'm a leader, I'm no longer a leader. Because it's already a position that I'm taking, and like it or not, eventually it's going to go down this route of a head getting too big. And nobody wants anybody to take a position and an authority over them anymore. Anyway, in the older, that's an old paradigm. Nowadays, people want to just see and observe and be encouraged. And even if you're in an organization and you may have that inverted commas position, but you have to stay off that position in your own mind and in your own head. Otherwise, you're going to be off very quickly. So I think that it's nothing to do with being in an organization or having a position or a status. It's really, we were saying earlier on, serving, having the awareness that serving, and actually something that one of the, again, that Jackee, who is now the head of the Brahma Kumaris, she always says, remember, whatever you do, seeing you, others will do the same. Yeah. And, you know, this is where, you know, if you want to be a leader in that. That, you know, seeing me, others will do the same. And so whatever it is, however small it is, but I have to be aware of the impact that I have on other people, consciously, unconsciously, deliberately or not. But you know, we're all influencing each other. We're all affecting each other. And so a true leader will be conscious of that. Here we go. True leader? I don't know. But you know, somebody who really feels that others are behind me, perhaps that's the way to describe it, will just do it in that way. You know, Jackee wants to say.
I was just thinking of a situation I had last week. I was finishing a coaching session with a senior leader in organisation, and as part of the way we set it up, you have a three-way with their line manager and them at the start of the session, and then you have a three-way conversation at the end. And the idea is you kind of have a sense of what the journey has been like and whether the objectives that we set at the beginning actually happened. And during the course of the conversation in the three-way, the line manager of the person I was coaching said, oh, and if you're a leader, that means you have followers. So I was like, oh, okay, shall I jump in there now? Should I respond to that? Because it set up this idea that we often think about leadership in that traditional sense. You've got to have followers. But actually, you know, I can think of many things that I have done in all kinds of different areas of my work where it has gone unrecognised. A few people might have acknowledged it, but I haven't had that formalisation of it. I've just done it, and I'm sure you have. So there is something about us, the awareness, and I think it is about self-awareness. You know, I think you are talking to the ego. You're saying, when the ego is holding a position and thinking, okay, this is where I need to be, this is what I need to be doing, we are in danger of going somewhere else. In a way, when we let go of the attachment to that, then it's almost like the universe opens. I said this to Manda earlier, or I don't know if I said it in this or earlier. The universe always sends us something better than we intended for ourselves. And I love what Neil said at the beginning. He said that, you know, a good coach, people often leave saying, you know, Jackee was a good coach, Manda was a good coach. But a great coach, the person leaves saying, I'm a great person, or I'm great. And I think that's the place where we know they're then stepping into their leadership.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you.